Started. Again, welcome to the office hours number 3. There will be time for questions periodically throughout this meeting, but also feel free to type your questions in the chat as we go along. And anyone on my team, if you see someone post a question in the chat, if you could just kind of interrupt me and we'll pause there and see if we can answer it. Our agenda today is to go over a couple of reminders regarding grant management, some upcoming deadlines, and just things to be aware of as you all are project directors or financial directors for the VCIF grants. We'll talk about purchasing large equipment items, and specifically vehicles, which I know is a big item on a lot of people's budgets. We'll briefly talk about invoicing, and then just some reminders about some upcoming trainings that are being offered by University of Tennessee Law Enforcement Innovation Center, who are the technical assistance provider for this grant. And then I'll announce the next office hours date as well. Very important reminder up top is that OCJP must be notified if there is any change in grant personnel. So if there's a change to your authorized official, that would in most cases be the mayor of your county or city, a change to the project director, or a change to the financial director, we must be notified in writing in 10 days. So just an email, doesn't have to be anything formal. The QR code on this screen will take you to the part of our grants manual that discusses these 3 grant project roles. It's very important that these roles are filled at all times, then that you keep us updated about who is in these roles. OCJP, the state sends frequent communication using the information that we have for these folks. So if your email changes, your phone number changes, it's very, very important that you keep us updated as soon as that change occurs. If you are a new project director or financial director, also welcome. And we're glad that you are working with us. Along those lines, there is a requirement for the VCIF grant that all project directors and financial directors must have been present for or view the recording of the orientation meeting that we hosted. The last one we hosted was back in August, and the recording of that one is on our website. It is on the VCIF Fund Source chapter of our grants manual. The link is right here. I believe Kate is going to drop a link to this as well in the chat. This is a requirement for all project directors, all financial directors. If you are a new project director or financial director and you haven't done this yet, please watch this video. Once you've watched it, you have to email your project management specialist, or you can email info.ocjp@tn.gov and let us know that you watched it. It's about an hour long. The video's on YouTube. If you go to this link right here, you can just click it and watch it at the conclusion of this meeting. But please make sure that you watch it as soon as possible. The deadline to watch this was the end of the year. We still have some stragglers, and that's okay, but it just needs to be done as soon as possible. And there is some very important and helpful information for the management of your grant that's communicated in that training. If you have questions about this, please reach out to your project management specialist. It's possible that you already were present for this or watched it, and so we don't want you to watch it again. If you think you've watched it, just email your PM specialist and they'll let you know. An additional requirement for all project directors and all civil rights compliance officers. So whoever in your department or office is designated as the civil rights compliance officer, both of these individuals must watch and complete the civil rights compliance training and quiz that is on the OCJP website. I think Kate is also dropping a link to this as well in the chat. This should be done within 90 days of starting your grant. I know for many of you, we're past the 90 days at this point. Please do this as soon as you can, as soon as you have the time to do this. This must be done once during every fiscal year in which you have a grant with the state of Tennessee, at least with Office of Criminal Justice Programs. If you have another grant with OCJP, you might have already completed this requirement. You don't need to watch it again just for the VCIF grant. But you should have documentation that you completed this training and that you completed the quiz afterwards, which is just a little screen that says that you completed it. And once you save that into your grant file, you have completed this requirement. Okay. Grant management stuff largely out of the way. Now to some important reminders about the actual VCIF grant itself. The deadline to submit a request to amend your executed contract is February 29th. It is about a month away. All requests must be submitted via email in writing to your project management specialist. There are many cases in which we may not approve a request to amend your contract. Not all requests are approved. Many are, if they are reasonable, if there are things that happen during the course of your grant that were out of your control, if there are changes that you need to make to your budget based on planning that happened a year ago, hitting the ground and facing reality and things changed. We entirely understand this is all part of the request to amend your contract. So we're happy to work with you to figure out something for your project. You can call your project management specialist and talk through this with them as well, but ultimately what the request needs to be submitted in writing. This request should include if there's a new expense or you're changing an expense significantly, what that is and why. It should still fit within your project as you wrote it to address violent crime in your community. It should include if you are changing something and getting rid of something that was in your budget, why it's okay for you to get rid of that, why it doesn't affect your project, or why it's important to get rid of that. You need to include how much money you're moving from a certain line item in the budget, for example, professional fees or capital or salaries or supplies. These are the major line item categories, how much you're moving out of that category. And, or I should reverse the bullet points here. You know, how much you're moving out of a certain category and how much you're moving it into a certain category. So what is the total amount being moved between line items? All of this should be included in your request. It will make it a lot easier for us to consider it. It will make it a lot faster for us to process it, to potentially approve it. We know you all have a ton of responsibilities in your precincts. We know that this may not be the only grant you're working on. You have all sorts of other administrative tasks. The same is true for us. Your project management specialists have anywhere between 30 to 75, 80 contracts, depending on the size and complexity of those contracts. So we are doing our best to get to these as quickly as we can. We have a deadline of February 29th so that we can make sure we get to all the ones that are submitted in time. We're going to do our best. So please, as soon as you notice that there are some things that need to change in your budget, please reach out to your project management specialist as soon as possible. We're also going to talk a little bit more about amendments at our next office hours meeting, which is going to be February 21st, so about a week before the deadline. Okay, I'm going to pause here for questions, and I see we do have one question in the chat that I'll read out from Jessica with the City of Sweetwater. Hey, Jessica. Our amendment request will likely be to move the funds for salary to the next fiscal year, as we did get people hired, but it took longer than expected. So while we planned for a full year of salaries, we didn't hire until November. Is this going to be something likely to be approved? I am not going to say definitively one way or another whether this specific request will be approved, and it depends also on some of the circumstances for why there was a delay in hiring. It also depends the level at which someone was hired, so you know what salary they ended up being hired at, and then it also depends on if you have a formula, if this is a formula grant or a collaborative grant. We consider these grants separately because the awards were determined in a different manner. So I would say reach out to your project management specialist with the specifics of this. It is possible that funds can be moved via an amendment between fiscal years, and delays in hiring might be considered as a reason to move money. Absolutely. Good question. Is there a way to verify that you have watched the first meeting? From Linda. Hi, Linda. Yeah, if you just email that email address, I'll go back here to info.ocjp@tn.gov. Can someone type that in the chat too, please? Or email your project management specialist we will just let us know what your grant role is and what agency you're with, and we'll be able to check for you. If you actually just put that in the chat right now, someone will check for you during this meeting. I just don't see what agency you're with. Okay, another question from Michelle Green. We were allotted $25,000 for various trainings. So I'm guessing you budgeted for $25,000. What happens if we don't spend that full amount? Although it was specified for training, can the excess be moved to equipment? That's a great question. So if we're talking about fiscal year 24 and you spent some amount of money for your trainings, but you didn't spend the full 25,000, it depends on how much you did spend, and it depends on if you have other trainings that are planned for the rest of the year. We definitely wouldn't want to advise that you move money out of a budget item if you still have planned expenses, or if you just aren't sure what the rest of the year looks like yet. So that would be a conversation with your project management specialist. There is some amount of money that can be moved between line items without amending your contract. And so if you reach out to your project management specialist, they will work with you and tell you the exact amounts and where it can be moved to. There's something called the 20% rule, which allows you to move up to 20% of a line item. It's a little bit more complicated than that, though, so I don't want you to just take that and run with it. I would talk to your project management specialist. You can also check out the grants manual. I don't remember, maybe someone from OCJP can put this in the chat or come off mute, exactly which section in the grants manual it is that discusses the 20% rule. But it is written down in our grants manual, and so you can review that. And if you still have questions, reach out to your project management specialist. But yes, some of that money can be moved to equipment if you have additional equipment expenses, or depending on your project, I would say that money can be moved. Okay, if someone could check for City of Lawrenceburg Financial Director, Linda Adair. We will check on that, Linda. Okay, any other questions for now about any of the grant management requirements, about amendment requests? And we'll have time at the end to pause for some of these questions too. Okay, Arpi Bazarian says, a handful of our capital purchases are coming in near but not quite at the amount we budgeted. Can you remind me what happens if we have unexpended funds? Do we submit an amendment for additional expenses? Or can we check in with our program manager closer to the end of our grant terms about adding an item? Okay, so a couple of things there. Very good question. It's totally fine if costs change based on how they were budgeted. We expect that to happen. If there are significant changes, though, to an item or to an overall line item, like the capital expenses line item, before you make those purchases, I would check in with your program manager just to make sure that you aren't going over what is allowed, or that there isn't any other maybe recourse for you. It's possible that maybe an item costs way more than you planned, and you were planning to buy 3 of them, and now you can only buy 2. That's totally fine. Just reach out to your program manager and let them know. It's really helpful for us to know that before the invoice comes into the Office of Business and Finance. If you have unexpended funds, so it sounds like maybe some of the items cost less than you anticipated, you have a couple of options. This is not to say that everyone can go out and do this right now, but I would say once you talk with your project management specialist, they'll tell you a couple of options. You might be able to buy more of the same item. Maybe you were planning to buy 10 and now you can afford 12 or 15, and that would be allowable. You can use some of that money maybe to cover another item that cost more if it's in the same budget category. So if it's still within capital and one item costs less and one item costs more, right? You can use the money to cover the item that costs more within a certain amount. You can't exceed 20% of any single budget category without an amendment. If you submit for an amendment for additional expenses, that to me means you're adding something to the budget that wasn't in there. that would have to be a request in writing to your project management specialist, and then we can consider that on a case-by-case basis.
Yes, I want to make sure, thank you, Ben. I just want to make sure then that that amendment, that would have to be by February 29th. We're keeping track of variances, and they're not off by a lot, but I guess I'm worried that at the end of the grant term, we're suddenly going to have like an extra $1,000 that we have to spend. I just want to make sure I don't need to submit an amendment for that by the end of February, right? Because we still have spending we'll do in the next handful of months. It might give us a clearer picture of where those variances exist.
Yeah, no, I understand that it's a little difficult to project out, and we're asking you to project out by the end of next month.
Okay.
So to the best of your ability, I would say before the end of February, if you can try to get a handle on what these expenses will actually look like through June, then we can consider all of that when we if we amend your contract. And so we can change the budget to the best of your knowledge for what the next, I guess, March through June, 4 months would look like. If you get to the very end of the grant, it's June, and you have $1,000 left over. At that point, it's very, very unlikely that we would do an amendment to a contract. There would have to be some really extreme circumstances there, or we'd have to be talking maybe in the order of tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. For $1,000, it costs the state time and money to amend a contract, and so I think you understand, that wouldn't be feasible. But also with $1,000, I mean, maybe there's some things in your budget that you could buy some more of if it's within a certain percentage, right, of the budget categories. So reach out to your project management specialist, and they can help you.
Great, thank you.
Great question. Thank you for asking it. Okay, it looks like, Linda, we have marked that you saw the orientation, so you don't have to watch it again. Okay, we have a couple more questions here. I'm gonna read through some of them and see if maybe we can answer them all at once. Will you please check Haywood County? Okay, that's for orientation, so hopefully someone in the chat is looking at that. It looks like these are a bunch of people asking about orientation. Thank you, Aaron, for looking at that. And Jackie as well. Okay, I'm gonna move on then. If you have questions about orientation, you can continue to ask those in the chat, and our team will look up for you. Okay, let's talk about purchasing equipment. Just some reminders, and this is going for vehicles, for all sorts of equipment, for anybody who has equipment in their budget. There are a couple of policies, procedures that you have to follow. You have to follow your agency's internal procurement policies when they relate to the ways that you can purchase items. Okay. So this grant does not excuse or give you a kind of loophole for purchasing something in a way that you wouldn't normally purchase it through your agency's procurement policies. You must follow TN and federal law when it comes to purchasing certain items. For example, drones are very restricted in the types of drones that can be purchased. So please make sure you are checking through your procurement department, through your legal department, to make sure you are in compliance with Tennessee and federal law. Please review the OCJP grants manual. There are specific sections on purchasing Acquires and supplement. Should we just, yeah. Let's back up. There are certain sections on purchasing supplies and equipment, sections 8, 10, and 12. I strongly recommend that you review these sections in the grants manual. And if you still have questions, reach out to your project management specialist. You also must follow VCIF specific requirements for this grant funding. That mostly pertains to very specific items. All radios have to be P25 encryption compliant, and all license plate readers have to be purchased through the statewide contract. You have to apply through the Department of Transit. There's a very specific process for this. If this is brand new information to you, which I hope it's not. But if it is, please reach out to your project management specialist to make sure that you have all the information you need for these specific items. We had a office hours meeting about LPRs, license plate readers, in November, and that those slides and that recording are posted on our FundSource chapter website, which is, Kate just dropped a link to it in the chat. Okay. Regarding how the funds can be spent for this equipment, if you have a contract term with a vendor, that contract term cannot last beyond 2025, calendar year 2025. You cannot use VCIF funds for any expense where the expense goes into 2026. Okay, this funding goes through 2025. All the contracts are going to be done at the end of 2025. This funding is not going to fund things past 2025. So we've seen this crop up when it comes to like licensing agreements or storage for like cloud storage stuff. If you have a vendor that's trying to get you to pay for storage for 5 years, that is not allowable with VCIF funds. You either have to renegotiate that contract with the vendor to make it end in 2025, or you can prorate the amount of the contract for the years that are allowable, right, through 2025, and then the rest would be an expense that you have to pay for with other funds. We've also seen this with warranties, and warranties we're carving that out as an exception. So warranty is a product that you buy once, right? It lasts for a certain number of years. You can't negotiate a warranty. The warranty can last beyond 2025. Any other agreement with a vendor cannot last beyond 2025. And then lastly, please refer to your equipment certifications. These are documents that you signed when you signed the contract. They should be in your possession, but if you want to review them, they are also available online and on our FundSource chapter. Specifically about vehicles. Just a reminder that when we say vehicles, we're talking about all sorts of items that people go into and move around with, right? So we're talking about boats, we're talking about vans, trucks, armored vehicles, ATVs, side-by-sides, which is a new thing that I learned about this week. All of these vehicles must be branded, marked with branding that is consistent with your agency's other vehicles. The only exception for them not being branded and having that agency wrapping is if they are explicitly defined in your contract scope, in the document that is at the end of your contract, as a covert or an undercover vehicle, and that they are being described, that they're being used in that way. If your scope doesn't say that, then your vehicle has to be marked. These vehicles also must be used by the unit or the individuals that are described in the scope. So this is something that we will be checking when we come to monitor your contract. Something we've seen a lot with vehicles, and this is the main reason for this meeting, and this is where, if you're taking notes, this would be the most important stuff to be writing down. If you are purchasing a vehicle in fiscal year 24, we've heard a lot from agencies that there is very low inventory, that is still a remnant of COVID times, of global supply chain hiccups and all that. This is also impacting the delivery timelines for vehicles. And so what we've told agencies, right, is that anything that is budgeted for FY24 must be purchased in FY24. And that is still the case. If you have a vehicle or any other piece of large equipment in your budget in FY24, that order needs to have been placed like months ago, but at the very least, like, you need to do that today. That needs to happen. That order needs to be placed today. Especially if you think there's going to be a long delivery timeline. And I'm talking like, if this is 10, 12 months, which we're seeing for a lot of vehicles, please do not delay. Please make sure that you're making that purchase. If you are anticipating that there are going to be any issues with getting this equipment in time or having the equipment delivered before June 30th, and this is equipment that's budgeted in FY24, if you don't think it's going to be delivered by June 30th of 2024, please reach out to your project management specialist, and we will work with you to figure out next steps. Some things that might help with these timelines, if you're still in the place where you can make an adjustment, you are not beholden to the specific brand, make, model in your contract that's listed in the budget. A lot of people said that they were buying, a Ford or some other specific brand model. You don't need to continue on that path if it's not going to happen by the end of this fiscal year. If you need to make an adjustment, you absolutely can. Just shoot a little message, shoot a little email to your project management specialists. Same thing with, if you said you were going to purchase the vehicle in a certain way, like you had a specific contract with a vendor, or you were going to purchase off the statewide contract, you are more than welcome to make a change that makes sense for your agency, as long, again, as you're following your agency's internal procurement policies. So you need to do your best to get this vehicle purchased and delivered by the end of this fiscal year within what is allowable for your agency. If those two things are in conflict, just reach out to us and we can talk about next steps. Something that I was made aware of recently is that there are nearby neighboring states, Missouri is one of them, there might be others, that sell surplus fleet vehicles that are relatively low mileage. If this is allowable, if your agency is allowed to do this, if this is something that you've checked with your legal department, that maybe you've done before, this is entirely reasonable and allowable with VCIF funds. We're not advocating this, but it's just another option for you if your procurement policies allow you to do that. Again, please make sure you're following your agency's procurement policies. Please make sure that you have done some research into purchasing vehicles this fiscal year. If you have already gotten to this point, you've placed your purchase order, and you're hearing from the vendor, hey, it's still going to be another 10 months. We're not going to get that vehicle until September, October, something like that. We will probably work with you to amend your contract. It's probably the best we can do at this point. Again, unless you found some other vehicle through some other means that you can purchase and that you're following your policies. If the vehicle you found that you need can't be delivered by the end of the fiscal year, we'll amend your contract. So, especially if you are an agency with a contract that ends in fiscal year 24, so you don't have any money in fiscal year 25, it's all in fiscal year 24. If you're right up on the cusp and that vehicle is maybe going to be delivered in June, but you're not sure and you haven't heard from the vendor in a while and they're being cagey, reach out to us. We definitely need to know that. And we can talk about case-by-case basis, we can talk about what to do. Okay, I'm going to pause here for questions and I'll actually go back to that screen. Okay, looks like some folks have been checking their orientation. We have a question from Michelle Green. Does that apply to other equipment besides vehicles, like cameras, if you can't get the brand name reference in the scope? For almost anything, this will apply. Yes, you can change the brand, make, model to fit your needs, to fit your budget. The only thing that you can't purchase a different brand for are license plate readers. Those are the only ones that must be purchased off the statewide contract. Any other questions about vehicles, vehicle timelines, delivery timelines, end of the fiscal year, stuff like that? Anything from my team that I'm forgetting or that you want to add for clarity? Again, I know it's hard to project out, and I know that many of you placed these orders a long time ago and you don't know when it's going to be delivered, but it is helpful for us know that, for you to reach out to us as best you can before February 29th. If you know for certain you're going to get it delivered in June, and then June comes and it's not going to be delivered, it's helpful for us to just know that you've kind of been on this the whole time. I can't say for certain what's going to happen in June, but as I mentioned, we have, every project management specialist has dozens and dozens of these. And so the earlier we know stuff, the better it is for you and for us that we can maybe find some solution. Okay. Want to remind everyone that invoicing quarterly is required if you've spent grant funds in the past quarter. So we just finished a quarter in December. You have a month after the end of the quarter to submit your invoice for all expenses in the prior quarter. So we're coming up on that deadline. It's January 30th or 31st. I mean, it's just by the end of January, please submit your invoice for any expenses that you've incurred prior to January. If you have monthly expenses, please submit invoices monthly. It's strongly recommended, especially if you're having like overtime or salary expenses or some other kind of monthly expense. We would love to be able to be reimbursing you monthly. If you are struggling to figure out how to invoice, or you have expended all these funds, but you don't have any of the, you've issued purchase orders, but you haven't actually spent the funds yet, right? That's okay. You don't need to submit an invoice that says $0, but it's helpful for you to just keep in touch with your project management specialist, because we don't want to get through March and see that you haven't submitted any invoices, or you're, at 0 to 5% of what you should be invoicing for, and we haven't heard from you. So we do our best to reach out, but please reach out to us too if it's been a while and you have any updates to share. When you submit your invoice, there is a document that goes with it. It's the INV certify document, and this tells us where your money goes. So very important that you fill this out and that this is updated. If you notice any discrepancies in your invoice workbook, please reach out to your project management specialist. You can also email obf.grants@tn.gov. That's the Office of Business and Finance. And this is where you send your invoice workbooks to. So we don't actually process your invoices, but we can kind of troubleshoot if you have questions. Any questions on invoicing or OCJP folks, anything to add? Anything you're seeing that you want to help agencies remember? We're almost at the end here, so if you have any other questions, we'll have time before the end of the meeting. But just wanted to remind folks that there are several free trainings for VCIF agencies that are upcoming. We have crime scene operations, field training, officer trainings, and then criminal investigations trainings, all in the next couple of months. If you want to attend these, you can email ashley.ferris@tennessee.edu. Her email is also going to be on the LEIC website that Kate just put a link to in the chat. These are scheduled all across the state, and there will be more added to this list as well. This might be the same one as I had prior. So yeah, field training officer trainings were just added. And these are free trainings for VCIF grantees. Likewise, UT LEIC is our TA provider for this grant. So if you have any needs related to trainings, policy development, getting stuff through your city county commission, things like that, you can reach out to UT. Rhiannon is the program manager there, and she's, I know, probably worked with many of you on your applications and other things. So they're a great resource if you haven't used them yet. And this QR code will take you to their, I think, training calendar. I think we'll just skip right through. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and we'll have time at the end. But if you guys wouldn't mind, it really helps us out to know, is this useful? Are there things that we can do better? If you could please fill out this really short survey, it takes like 2 minutes, about this meeting that we just had. There's going to be an option at the top for you to select VCIF office hours as the training that you're evaluating. And this code will take you right to that training, as well as the link here and the link in the chat. The next office hours is February 21st. It's going to be, we're going to give ourselves a little bit longer for this one, just because we're going to be talking about amendments. In the future, we'll also be talking about monitoring. So definitely keep your eyes peeled for future communication from us about office hours. We want to make sure everyone gets this information. We are now, I counted, we have about 22 weeks left in the fiscal year. So we're less than half of the year left. We've still got a lot that needs to be done. And so if you have a potential amendment request, I definitely recommend that you come to this February 21st meeting. So that is all. I'll leave this up here so y'all can access the satisfaction survey. We really appreciate you coming today, and really appreciate all your work that you're doing with this grant money and just in general. So thank you all for your time, and thank you for your partnership. And we'll all stay on for a little bit longer for questions, but I'm going to end the recording now so that if folks need to watch, it doesn't go on forever. Stop recording.